Years ago. We had a son, you know, but he grew up and wanted his own home and robots." "Naturally enough," Robert commented, somewhat briefly, since Henry had told him the story before. "I often wonder what became of him," mused the older man. "That's the trouble with what's left of Earth culture. No families any more." "Now he'll tell me about the time he lived in a crowd of 5," thought Robert. He, his wife, their boy, and the visiting couple with the fleet of robot helicopters. Deciding that Henry could reminisce just as well without a listener, Robert quietly ordered the robot to turn itself off. "Maybe I will make the trip," he pondered, on the way downstairs. "If only to see what it's like with another person about." At about noon of the second day after that, he remembered that thought with regret. The ancient roads, seldom used and never repaired, were rough and bumpy. Having no flying robots, Robert was compelled to transport himself and a few mechanical servants in ground vehicles. He had, idiotically he now realized, started with the dawn and was already tired. Consequently, he was perhaps unduly annoyed when 2 tiny spy eyes flew down from the hills to hover above his caravan on whirring little propellers. He tried to glance up pleasantly while their lenses televised pictures to their base, but he feared that his smile was strained. The spy eyes retired after a few minutes. Robert's vehicle, at his voiced order, turned onto a road leading between 2 forested hills. "Right there," he thought 4 hours later, "was where I made my mistake. I should have turned back and gone home." He stood in the doorway of a small cottage of pale blue trimmed with yellow, watching his robots unload baggage. They were supervised by Blue Two, the spare for Blue One. Also watching, as silently as Robert, was a pink and blue striped robot which had guided the caravan from the entrance gate to the cottage. After one confused protest in a curiously high voice, it had not spoken. "Maybe we shouldn't have driven through that flower bed," thought Robert. "Still, the thing ought to be versatile enough to say so. I wouldn't have such a gimcrack contraption." He looked up as another humanoid robot in similar colors approached along the line of shrubs separating the main lawns from the surrounding cottage. "Marcia Joan has finished her nap. You may come to the house now." Robert's jaw hung slack as he sought for a reply. His face flushed at the idea of a robot's offering him permission to enter the house. Nevertheless, he followed it across the wide lawn and between banks of gaily blossoming flowers to the main house. Robert was not sure which color scheme he disliked more, that of the robot or the unemphatic pastel tints of the house. The robot led the way inside and along a hall. It pulled back a curtain near the other end, revealing a room with furniture for human use. Robert stared at the girl who sat in an armchair, clad in a long robe of soft pink material. She looked a few years younger than he. Her hair and eyes were also brown, though darker. In contrast to Robert's, her smooth skin was only lightly tanned, and she wore her hair much longer. He thought her oval face might have been pleasant, if not for the analytical expression she wore. "I am quite human," he said in annoyance. "Do you have a voice?" She rose and walked over to him curiously. Robert saw that she was several inches shorter than he, about the height of one of his robots. He condescended to bear her scrutiny. "You look just as you do on the telescreen," she marveled. Robert began to wonder if the girl were feeble-minded. How else should he look? "I usually swim at this hour," he said to change the subject. "Where's the pool?" Marcia Jones stared at him. "Pool of what?" she asked. Sensing sarcasm, he scowled. "Pool of water, of course, to swim in. What do you think I meant, a pool of oil?" "I am not acquainted with your habits," retorted the girl. "None of that stupid wit," he snapped. "Where is the pool?" "Don't shout!" shouted the girl. Her voice was high and unpleasantly shrill compared with his. "I don't have a pool. Who wants a swimming pool, anyway?" Robert felt his face flushing with rage. "So she won't tell me," he thought. "All right, I'll find it myself. Everybody has a pool, and if she comes in, I'll hold her head under for a while." Sneering, he turned toward the nearest exit from the house. The gaily striped robot hastened after him. The door failed to swing back as it should have at Robert's approach. Impatiently, he seized the ornamental handle. He felt his shoulder grasped by a metal hand. "Do not use the front door," said the robot. "Let go!" ordered Robert, incensed that any robot should presume to hinder him. "Only Marcia Joan uses this door," said the robot, ignoring Robert's displeasure. "I'll use it if I like," declared Robert, jerking the handle. The next moment he was lifted bodily into the air. By the time he realized what was happening, he was carried, face down, along the hall. Too astonished even to yell, he caught a glimpse of Marcia Jones' tiny feet beneath the hem of her pink robe as his head passed the curtained doorway. The robot clumped onto the door at the rear of the house and out into the sunshine. There it released its grip. When Robert regained the breath knocked out of him by the drop, and assured himself that no bones were broken, his anger returned. "I'll find it, wherever it is," he growled, and set out to search the grounds. About 20 minutes later, he was forced to admit that there really was no swimming pool. Except for a brook 50 yards away, there was only the tiled bathroom of the cottage to bathe in. "Primitive!" exclaimed Robert, eyeing this. "Manually operated water supply, too. I must have the robots fix something better for tomorrow." Since none of his robots was equipped with a thermometer, he had to draw the bath himself. Meanwhile, he gave orders to Blue 2 regarding the brook and a place to swim. He managed to fill the tub without scalding himself, mainly because there was no hot water. His irritation, by the time he had dressed in fresh clothes and prepared for another talk with his hostess, was still lively. "Ah, you return?" Marcia Joan commented from a window above the back door. "It is time to eat," said Robert frankly. "You are mistaken." He glanced at the sunset, which was already fading. "It is time," he insisted. "I always eat at this hour." "Well, I don't." Robert leaned back to examine her expression more carefully. He felt very much the way he had the day the water supply robot for his pool had broken down, and despite Robert's bellowed orders, had flooded a good part of the lawn before Blue One had disconnected it. Some instinct warned him, moreover, that bellowing now would be useless as it had been then. "What do you do now?" he asked. "I dress for the evening." "And when do you eat?" "After I finish dressing." "I'll wait for you," said Robert, feeling that much tolerance could do no particular harm. He encountered the pink and blue robot in the hall, superintending several plain yellow ones, bearing dishes and covered platters. Robert followed them into a dining room. "Marcia Jones sits there," the major domo informed him as he moved toward the only chair at the table. Robert warily retreated to the opposite side of the table and looked for another chair. None was visible. Of course, he thought, trying to be fair. Why should anybody in this day have more than one chair? Robots don't sit. He waited for the major domo to leave, but it did not. The serving robots finished laying